But despite working like 20, 25 hours a week, pulling six figures, which I think for a lot of people would be an ideal situation, you realize pretty quickly that you didn't want to do door-to-door sales forever, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I appreciate you, by the way, for doing the research before we're having this conversation. It definitely shows. Um, yeah, that was exactly right. It seemed like an ideal situation for most 22-year-olds to pull a six-figure income, working 20 hours a week. It seems like pretty ideal. But I learned pretty quickly that six figures is not a lot of money. You know what I mean? Like if you want to start doing stuff that you want to do, you start traveling a little bit, you start spending a little bit of money here, there. It's like, man, six figures is not that much money. And I knew that I didn't want to be knocking on doors, so it was kind of counterintuitive because at the end of that year, when I reached the goals that I wanted to reach, I was basically done because I knew that I was already like scraping up against the ceiling where I was in the opportunity that I had. And I knew if I doubled my work ethic and I put in more hours and recruited more guys, I could probably get up to 150, maybe $200,000 a year. But that would still be the limit. Anything beyond that would be really, really difficult to do. And, if it's 10 years later, maybe I have a bunch of referral business, I could get to a quarter million, but like that, it just wasn't what I wanted to be doing. And when I looked at 32-year-old Travis, I didn't want to be knocking doors anymore. And so, yeah, I just quit. I quit. I stopped doing it. That's the crappy thing about a 100% commission thing is that you can't half-ass it and get any decent results. If you have a salary, you can just show up to work, collect a paycheck, do the bare minimum, and figure out what you're going to do next. 100% commission. You can't just show up to work and do the bare minimum. You got to like be all in and be attacking your sales numbers and stuff. And I wasn't at that point anymore, so I stopped and started doing some personal development for the first time in my life, reading some books, listening to audiobooks. And that's when I discovered podcasting for the first time.
Yeah. And then with that podcasting ultimately led you to John Lee Dumas, which led to you going to his mastermind, right? And that was one of the big steps you took in terms of your personal development.
That was huge, man. Yeah, it was huge. I had never invested in myself at that type of a level. Prior to that, it was like audiobook, book, $25, $18. And then all of a sudden I'm looking at a weekend mastermind, 3-day mastermind for $6,500 in Puerto Rico. So I got to pay for my flights and like all the other stuff, food, all these other things. This is an $8,000 weekend. You know what I mean? And I was just like, whoa, is this something that people do? And I would talk to a few of my friends and they were obviously scoffing at it and, like being like, well, you could spend that, you could spend that on so many other things. Why would you do that? And blah, blah, blah. And, but I ended up taking the plunge and it was one of the best decisions that I ever made in my life up to that point. And really got me into the, investments in yourself will always pay off type of mentality. And I started aggressively making continuous investments and up leveling myself, my life, my knowledge, my network, and all of the above.
Why is the reason that it was one of the most important financial decisions you made up to that point? Because like this is coming from someone who's never attended a mastermind. So like I see that $6,500 figure and I can't wrap my head around that. So what made the exchange of value $6,500? What were you getting in return that made it so worth it?
Yeah, I think it just proved that it was possible for me to be able to get in touch with people that most people don't get in touch with. Somebody like at the time, John Lee Dumas. The dude gets 1 million plus downloads a month on his podcast. People are reaching out to him all the time. There's a lot of people that try to get in and learn from him, and he has a course, and I saw that, and I was like, I could do that. It's only $1,000. It's $97 a month. I can do that for sure. But then I was just like, but that's what everybody else does. And I don't want to be everybody else. I want to be better. I want to be the top 1%. I want to like get in and do this really, really well. I don't want to half-ass it. And like I said, going back, like the best way that I knew how to do that was proximity to people who were doing it at the highest level. And JLD was doing it at the highest level. And I wanted proximity to him and I wanted to get to know him, have a relationship with him, where I could get some advice and learn from him and maybe get some connections every now and again. Like I started placing a really high value on the relationships that I had inside of the space that I wanted to be influential in.
And not only was the proximity to JLD important, but you tried to separate yourself even at that mastermind, right? From my understanding, you bought a drone to try and take some aerial photos of his house, but crashed it before you got the chance to do so.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So when I first made the investment, it was like my immediate reaction was I better get my money back. You know what I mean? Like they better show up and deliver value like crazy. And my immediate taker brain started kicking in. And then I was just like, no, 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 no. If I'm going to go out to this thing, I need to approach it as a giver. I need to come here figure out a way to differentiate myself even from the 6 people that are going to be out here, and build a real relationship, with this guy. And so I was like, well, at that time I had a background in photography. I did some photography in college and shot a few weddings and things like that to make extra money. And so I brought out my camera. I bought a drone. I was like, man, I'll take some good footage of this, mastermind they're doing. That way, next time they do it, they'll have some like really good professional style footage. This will be a really cool value add. And then, yeah, I get there. The first night I throw the drone up. It's only like the second time I've ever flown it, because my house at the time in Lancaster was in like restricted airspace because there was a Northrop plant like 2 miles from my house. So like, we literally couldn't fly it. So I get there, throw it up the first night, and beautiful sunset, Puerto Rico, got beautiful scenes of the beach. I'm coming back to land it. I thought the landing was a lot more automated than it turned out to be. I go to land it on this like really tiny condo roof space. And basically one of the propellers caught a plant, and then like the plant, when it got caught on the propeller, like threw the drone into the wall next to it, and 2 of the propellers broke, and it only came with one replacement propeller. So yeah, I was essentially effed at that point, because the $1,200 investment that I had made on top of the whole weekend investment that I had made literally crashed in front of my eyes, and along with it the opportunity to add value and stick out and stand out a little bit. So I had to kind of keep my eyes peeled for the rest of the weekend to see if there's another way I could add value, which ended up working out okay. So
What was that other way you ended up finding? What was the other way you added value?
yeah, he basically what ended up happening is, throughout the weekend, everybody got to know that I was a door to door sales guy. I'd done door to door sales for a long time. So I stopped doing door to door to like get into personal development stuff. But after doing that for a few months, I still got to make money. I still got to pay the bills. And so a buddy of mine started selling water purifiers door to door, and the margins were healthy. And so I basically was just doing that. So I would do that like 20, 25 hours a week, and then I would do podcasting 20, 25 hours a week, and that was how I was making money. And so he learned that I had a bunch of experience in sales. He was going to be speaking at a conference, had a booth where he was going to be selling journals, that he had just came out with. And he was like, "Hey, would you mind coming by the booth? I have like this guy that volunteered to work the booth, but he's never done sales before. Can you just like give him a few different, closing lines and ideas for him to sell at this trade show? Because when I was doing door to door, we would also do home shows and, different trade shows and stuff. And so I had a lot of experience in those things. And so I basically was just like, hey, instead of just giving them a couple minutes of advice, I'll just work the booth for you. Like I'll sell at the booth for you, which was obviously a um in terms of my actual time and what I got back from it, was a bad use of time. Like if I worked a 3-day home show with the water purifiers that I was selling, I could pull 5 figures in a weekend. You know what I mean? But instead of doing that, I'm volunteering 3 full days, like 3 full 8-hour days at a trade show, hawking journals for $30 a piece, making $0 in commission, paying for my own hotel room to be there just for proximity to somebody who is doing what I wanted to be doing at the highest level. And I think people are always afraid to reinvent themselves, man. Like people get this thing in their head where like they've done well in one space. When they move over to the other space, they expect everybody to like bring them in with open arms and be like, hey, we worship you because you're awesome at this other thing. It's like, it doesn't matter, man. Like you're starting over. So you got to start over and have the humility to start over and be like, hey, look, I may have, had some successes over here, but I have no idea what the hell I'm doing over here. So I need some help. You know what I mean? I feel like a lot of people's egos get in the way of them doing that, and that just wasn't me. I was just like, I'll do whatever I can. All I want is proximity to power. All I want is proximity to the people who've been doing this at the highest level for a long time, so that I can learn and build relationships with those people. And then at that event, he ended up inviting me out to another event that he was keynoting at. I got to work another event with him. He introduced me to the event organizer at that event who was running a high level mastermind. I ended up joining that mastermind, which led me to a different mastermind, and made introductions for me across the entire industry. Like this was a huge, pivotal moment for me.
How do you switch from that? You mentioned when you first signed up for JLD's mastermind, you kind of had that taker's mindset. How do you switch from that to the giver's mindset? How is that like just something you have to be conscious of, or what do you do to switch that?
Yeah, you just got to be conscious of it. A lot of people don't realize that they're doing it, and they place too much short term value on maybe some knowledge. So like that weekend, is like, did I get some great knowledge information? Yeah, sure, but is that what made it worth the money? Definitely not. it's definitely the relationships that made it worth the money. And people have way too much of a short term mind when they think about those things, and then they'll go out, spend the money, they'll come back and be like, "Hey, I didn't make that back in the next 30 days, so it was a waste of money, and screw that guy for charging me that much. What a waste of time. He's a scam artist, all this other bullshit." And it's just like, "No, you're just looking at it wrong. You're looking at it incorrectly. You need to reframe it as like, how can I continue to add value, give to people, show up day after day for a multitude of years, and like it's always going to come back good on you." So to me, it was just a mindset shift. If you haven't read the book Give and Take, I highly recommend it. To me, it helps me. It helps me. Helps me make sense of my decisions from a logical standpoint if I can have research and data to back up why I'm making those decisions. And if you read Give and Take, you'll find that being a giver always beats being a taker, or being a matcher even. And so it was easy for me to kind of look at that, look at what I was doing, and be like, this is not going to work out for me if I come into the situation with this mentality and this mindset. And so I need to switch it up. You know.
And while we're on the topic of masterminds, I have to ask about Dan Fleyshman's mastermind because I believe you attended that. It's a six-figure mastermind, right? $100,000 to attend.
Yes, sir. Yeah. I mean, there's always levels, you know what I mean? The first one I did was 6,500 bucks, and then I did one for 15K, and rejoined that one well, once or twice after that, and then yeah, doing now this one, the 100 million mastermind with Dan Fleyshman and Joel Marion that run it together. And yeah, it's $100,000 to get into that mastermind, but man, the relationships have been out of this world. I've made some amazing connections. We've done business, done deals with a lot of people that are in the group, and it's been overall a really great experience.